We got to talk about the state of pharmacy today. Now, a few months ago, I made a video talking about is pharmacy worth it in 2024? And even in the short, 3 to 4 months since I've made that video, there have been some pretty outstanding changes going on. And if you work in pharmacy, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for this video. All right, guys, I got some more doom and gloom for you, as if we needed any more of that to close out the year, right? But I feel like I would be doing the entire profession a disservice if I didn't put this out there, if I didn't talk about this. And I'm going to go to my notes because I really, really need to get this right, just so that you understand the magnitude of what's going on. Okay. Let's start with the facts, okay? Major pharmacy chains are closing, all right? And I'll post a link to the articles for all of this. So in the next 3 years, Walgreens plans to close 1,200 stores, and with 500 of those being next year. That's roughly 13% of its, 8,700 U.S. locations. CVS is going to close 900 stores over the next 3 years. That's roughly 10% of its footprint. Now, Rite Aid has already gone out of business, and I think they'll be closing the rest of their stores in the next 3 years. And even this year, 2024, there have been 2,300 pharmacy closures. 2,300. I feel like if this was happening in some other industry, tech, because I remember when tech, software engineers and things like that in the tech industry, or they weren't, a lot of them weren't even software engineers, just people who worked in tech, were being laid off. It was big news, right? Like the 10,000 Google employees. Pharmacy is a much smaller world, and that is a lot of closure. That is a lot of people getting laid off over a very short amount of time. And I just feel like it's not being talked about on a large scale. So I want to talk about it. So I kind of see this going, affecting two specific groups of people, right? So we have our patients, our customers, and then we have us, the employees, right? The people who make up, pharmacy. And even to further break down those two groups, I kind of think about who's going to be affected by this the most. And on the patient side, I'm thinking, and I have no data to back this up, but I bet my bottom dollar this is how it plays out, right? Two communities I think that will be impacted are going to be rural communities, just because there's not a lot of volume in those areas, and poor communities, impoverished communities. So once again, these are areas that, there's reportedly a lot of, loss, meaning theft in those areas, which is probably true, to be honest with you. So people who already are struggling with access to healthcare and medication are going to further have their access to healthcare and medication restricted, not to mention having access to the most accessible healthcare provider in the world, which is a pharmacist, right? So we're gonna restrict that down even more. And on the other side of that, we have the staff, right? We have pharmacy people, pharmacists, technicians, clerks, general store managers, because we do need help running, the outside stuff for most of these places. And so apparently in 2024, there's already 2,300 pharmacies closed. And if I'm just doing like quick math in my head, each store at minimum probably has, 3 pharmacists, at minimum 2 full-timers and a part-timer or a PRN. Anywhere from 5 to 8 technicians for like a small store, if these are the stores that are indeed closing. And that number could be higher. So it's easy to see where that 23,000 people laid off figure comes from. And when I think about who's going to be affected the most by this, it's going to be the pharmacist, right? Because, if you're a technician, technicians are actually in relatively high demand. There's other places for you to work. Technician roles are actually expanding. If you work as a cashier, right, there are a lot of other industries that can, hire cashiers or retail people. You're still kind of pliable in that regard. For the pharmacist, like, this is it. Like, we've already spent, 8 to some people 10 years pursuing this degree, and it's not like we can just be like, oh, well, I'm just gonna go to, Home Depot and, do that now. If this thing doesn't, work out, even, getting another job within pharmacy for a pharmacist is going to have to include, unless you get another retail job, which is they're going to be hard to come by because these are all retail places that are closing. It's going to have to, getting another pharmacy job is going to have to include some type of reinvestment in upskilling or re-education in order to get into one of these other areas of pharmacy a lot of times. So it's just really scary to think about what that impact is going to look like. Yeah, and that's all doom and gloom. But let's talk about, I don't know, what I think that you should do, what I've been doing, because I've kind of seen this, writing on the wall for a while now. If you go and watch that video, my very first video, you can kind of see that I kind of allude to some of this happening, and it's only been getting worse since then. Oh, and a quick side note. If you work in another area of pharmacy and you're kind of like, thank God, I did what I was supposed to do, I went and got my board certification, or I went and got in a clinical role and I work at the hospital now, you're not safe either, because you have to think about, what are all of these pharmacists who get laid off going to do? I think the next natural step for them would be to try and get out of retail and get into a hospital role. It's the next largest sector of pharmacy job supply. And the hospital realm is not all that sweet either as far as job supply goes. They're much more difficult to get into. There are fewer positions available, and there are a lot of hospitals reporting that they may have to shed staff in the next 3 years too. So just something to think about. Like, don't tune out if you're a clinical pharmacist or you work in some specialty. You're still going to want to hear everything that's going on. So what do I recommend that you do given the current outlook of pharmacy? So I kind of think of 3 major things that you can do right now to kind of pad yourself a little bit. And this is going to go double if you're currently working retail, okay? Because you really need to at least have some answers to some of the questions that I'm going to pose. All right. So thing number 1, start upskilling. Okay. So I think if you work in a traditional dispensing role right now, it would behoove you to go ahead and find out what area of pharmacy that you want to work in, find out what those skills are that you'll need to acquire, and go ahead and start working on that. It's going to be a lot easier to do that now and to transition out now before it really hits the fans and your application, your resume, and your CV are out there with thousands, tens of thousands of other pharmacists who will eventually probably need to find other positions. So I would say start working on that now. Now, what does that mean by upskilling? I think, like, if you don't have any clinical skills, try to get on PRN somewhere now and build up those clinical skills. If you can stomach going to get a residency, I don't say that lightly. I know that is a whole life endeavor, but I think if you can stomach, cutting now and trying to get into a residency and, getting that knocked out, that would help you. Any certificates that you can do, anything outside of your traditional roles that you can gain experience or certification in, is going to help you out. For me, it was engaging in medical writing and compounding, and those 2 things have served me well. I don't really do traditional roles anymore, traditional dispensing roles. And I think if you look hard about something that you want to do, you can find out what those skills are, and you can start working on that and have something put together within the next 3 years that can help you slide out of that danger zone. And my rule of thumb for that is the weirder, the better. If it's informatics, if it's nuclear pharmacy, if you can get into one of these other areas, I think they're safer. Clinical, I will still say, is good. You can still do it. But like I said, I'll still offer my warning that I think once this situation plays out and all these retail places close, I think clinical pharmacy will be the next area that everybody kind of looks at as the one that's overcrowded, and we'll see what that does for, working conditions for pharmacists going forward. Number 2 thing that you can do is, a very common sense thing. I think people say this all the time. I don't know if anybody ever does it, but it's going to be critically important that you save your coins, okay? Put something in the bank. I don't really care how you do it, but do it, right? Whether that's adding to your life insurance policy, whether that's, putting in your Roth or contributing more to your 401k, buying more stocks, whatever, however you save, I would do more of it with an emphasis on liquidity. Okay, so there may be a time in the next, 3 years where you find yourself either unemployed or underemployed, and having a plan for that, and having money in the bank is always going to make that situation a little bit easier, as well as for your upskilling, right? So, like, unfortunately, if you've been a pharmacist for any amount of time, whenever it's time for us to learn or gain skills, there's always somebody with their hand out, like, okay, you want to be a clinical pharmacist? Here's my training program. It's $600. Or if you want to take this board cert exam, it's $600, and then it's $600 for the material. There's always a tax for upskilling, right? So you might want to have some money put away to be ready to, pay the gatekeepers for trying to get into another area of pharmacy. But I think it is, especially with the backdrop of what's going on, it's going to be money well spent. So yeah, save your coin. And number 3 is what I call the nuclear option, right? It is the thought of, it's even hard to say out of my mouth because it's so radical, but maybe it's time you start planning your second career. Look, these efforts to upskill, I know I said everything really fast, but it's a lot. And I could understand if you look at that and you go, you know what? For what it takes for me to go from the traditional dispensing role to be a nuclear pharmacist, man, I could have a whole another degree. I could start a whole nother career field. I can, open my own business. Like, I'm not going to do that. And I think this is what my goal for the video is to, at the very least, put this out there and have whoever's watching this that is a pharmacist think, let me at least have an answer to that question of what I would do if I lost my job, or if I had to upskill, or if I had to get another career, and what would that be? So I think at the very least, have a plan for what you would do if being a pharmacist was no longer a good thing for you. And it sounds a little out there and it sounds a little nuts, but that may be the case in the next, 3 to 5 years, to be 100% honest with you. And I would have an answer for that. All right, so let's wrap this thing up. Pharmacy is going through some pretty tough changes right now. And I don't know, in 5 to 10 years, it could be amazing again. I don't know. But for the trends that I'm seeing now, it's some cause for concern, especially if you're a pharmacist. So think about what I said. Try to put a plan together as to what you would do if one of these things really impacts your life. And let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. And remember, if you're a pharmacist, I'm rooting for you. But for sure, try to put something together and figure out what you would do in these trying times, all right? Till the next time, peace out.